A leopard raised 3 lion cubs as her own, but when they grew up, everything changed. At first, it looked like a miracle, nature breaking its own rules. A predator adopting her rival's young, raising them with instincts no lion should ever have. But behind this wonder hides a dangerous truth, one that powerful men will do anything to bury. As the cubs grow stronger, the line between survival and betrayal begins to blur. And when predators, both human and wild, close in, their strange family faces a test that could end in blood. What happens when love defies nature and survival collides with greed? When the cubs are forced to choose, will they protect the mother who raised them or lose her forever? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The African sun hadn't yet peeked over the horizon when Larkin Keene settled into her cramped research station, the small metal container that served as her office hummed with the whir of computers and cooling fans. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, downloading the morning's drone footage from the northern sector of the wildlife reserve. She took a sip of lukewarm coffee, her gray-green eyes scanning the footage with practiced efficiency. The drone had covered the usual route, watering holes, known den sites, and the paths most frequented by the local wildlife. After years in the field, Larkin could almost predict what each frame would show, until she couldn't. Her coffee cup clattered against the desk as she leaned forward, nose nearly touching the screen. "That can't be right," she whispered, rewinding the footage. But there it was again, unmistakable even in the dawnlight. Sabella, the leopard she had rehabilitated 3 years ago after finding her caught in a poacher's trap, was curled beneath an acacia tree. But she wasn't alone. 3 tiny golden bodies pressed against her spotted flank, nursing contentedly. Lion cubs, not leopard cubs, lion cubs. Larkin's hands trembled as she zoomed in on the footage. She knew every marking on Sabella's coat, could recognize the distinctive scar that ran along her side. There was no mistake. The leopard she had nursed back to health was now nursing 3 lion cubs. "This is impossible," she breathed, but the evidence was right there on her screen. The cubs, probably no more than a few weeks old, seemed perfectly at ease with their spotted adoptive mother. Sabella's tail curved protectively around them as they fed, her amber eyes alert for any danger. Larkin's mind raced with the implications. Cross-species adoption was rare enough among similar species, but a leopard nursing lion cubs, it was virtually unheard of. This could revolutionize everything they understood about big cat behavior. Her excitement bubbled over as she reached for her phone, dialing the number for the reserve's main office. "This is Larkin Keene," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need to report something extraordinary. You're going to want to see this." Within an hour, her tiny research station was crowded with skeptical faces. The local wildlife authorities stood with arms crossed, frowning at her computer screen. Representatives from the Safari Consortium whispered among themselves, shooting concerned glances her way. "Ms. Keene," one of the officials said, "are you absolutely certain about what you're seeing?" "I've worked with Sabella for years," Larkin insisted. "I know her markings, her movements, and those are definitely lion cubs." "This could cause quite a stir," another official mused. The tourists would love it," Larkin interrupted. "This is incredible. We should be documenting this, studying it. Think of what we could learn about." The door swung open, cutting her off mid-sentence. Barrett Devereux filled the doorframe, his silver hair catching the morning light. His safari clothes were perfectly pressed despite the early hour, and his presence seemed to suck all the oxygen from the small space. Now, he said, his voice smooth as honey but with an edge that made Larkin's spine stiffen. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need to approach this situation with appropriate caution." Larkin knew Devereux by reputation, the owner of the largest luxury safari operation in the region, a man whose influence stretched far beyond his lodge empire. He moved into the room like he owned it, peering at her computer screen with carefully constructed interest. "Fascinating footage, Ms. Keene," he said, "but perhaps we should keep this quiet for now. Consider the disruption this could cause to the natural order of things, to our operations." Disruption? Larkin couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. "This is a scientific breakthrough. We have an obligation to maintain the stability of this reserve," Devereux cut in, his charm dropping for just a moment to reveal something harder underneath. "Imagine the chaos if this gets out. Photographers and filmmakers swarming the area, disturbing the very phenomenon they wish to document. No, I think it's best we minimize this incident." The other officials nodded along, already convinced. By Devereux's logic, or perhaps by something else entirely. Larkin looked from face to face, seeking any sign of support, but found none. "You can't just ignore this," she protested. But Devereux was already turning toward the door. Discussion clearly over in his mind. "Ms. Keene," he said, pausing in the doorway, "I strongly suggest you focus on your regular research duties. Some things are better left undisturbed." The warning in his voice was clear as a leopard's growl. One by one, the others filed out, leaving Larkin alone with her footage and her racing thoughts. She looked back at her screen, at Sabella's protective curl around those 3 impossible cubs. Something wasn't right here. Not just the miraculous adoption, but the quick move to suppress it. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard, then began to type. She might have been told to step back, but she wouldn't ignore what she'd witnessed. Sabella had trusted her once, when she'd found the leopard injured and afraid. Now those cubs needed her trust to dot as the sun climbed higher over the African bush. Larkin began documenting everything she'd seen. She knew she was probably risking her career, maybe more, but some things were worth fighting for. And this miracle, a leopard nursing lion cubs, defying every natural law they thought they knew. This was one of them. The morning stretched on as she worked, the distant calls of wildlife drifting through her window. Somewhere out there, Sabella was protecting her adopted family, breaking all the rules to do what she felt was right. Larkin straightened her shoulders, determination settling over her like a familiar weight. Sometimes, she realized, you had to break the rules to protect. What mattered? The morning heat pressed down on Larkin as she stood her ground before Barrett Devereux's mahogany desk. The Safari Lodge owner's silver hair caught the sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, but his smile held no warmth. "Miss Keene," he said, adjusting his crisp khaki shirt, "your interference with the leopard situation has become problematic. The tourist season is approaching, and we can't have unfounded claims disrupting operations." Larkin's hands clenched at her sides. "Unfounded? I have documented proof of Sabella nursing those cubs. This is an unprecedented opportunity for research. It's a liability," Devereux cut in smoothly. "And frankly, your permits are under review." Before Larkin could respond, heavy boots sounded on the wooden deck outside. Ranger Ridge Calloway entered, his weathered face tight with discomfort. He nodded briefly to Larkin before addressing Devereux. "Sir, the paperwork you requested." He placed a manila folder on the desk, avoiding Larkin's gaze. "Excellent timing, Ridge," Devereux said. "Please inform Miss Keene of the board's decision." Calloway shifted his weight, dust falling from his uniform. "Larkin, effective immediately, you're ordered to cease all interference with the leopard and cubs. No tracking, no documentation." "This is ridiculous," Larkin protested. "Those cubs need protection." "Sabella's family unit is unique." "They're not a family unit," Devereux interrupted. They're an adoration that's drawing unwanted attention. Ridge. Make sure she understands the consequences of non-compliance. Later that afternoon, Larkin found refuge in Huck Meriwether's medical station. Her old friend was organizing supplies, his camera equipment stacked carefully in one corner. He listened as she paced, venting her frustration. "They're trying to shut me down, Huck. Devereaux has the whole board in his pocket." Huck set down a box of bandages. "Your instincts have never steered you wrong before, Lark. What's your gut telling you? That something's very wrong. The way they're pushing to isolate Sabella and the cubs." She ran a hand through her sun-bleached hair. "It doesn't make sense unless a commotion outside cut her off." Shouts echoed across the compound. Larkin and Huck rushed out to find a crowd gathering near the research vehicle depot. As they approached, the acrid smell of vomit hit them. A young male lion lay motionless in the shade of an acacia tree, foam crusting around its muzzle. Huck immediately went into medic mode, pushing through the onlookers with his kit. But even as he knelt beside the magnificent creature, Larkin knew it was too late. The lion's eyes were fixed and glassy. "Poison," Huck confirmed grimly, examining the animal's mouth. "Probably strychnine." Larkin's blood ran cold. This wasn't an accident. The location was too convenient, too close to the main compound. As she scanned the faces in the crowd, she caught Devereaux watching from the lodge's elevated deck, his expression unreadable. That evening, Ridge Calloway appeared at her research station door. His face was drawn as he handed her an official notice. 72 hours, he said quietly. "All permits revoked." "I'm sorry, Larkin." She waited until his footsteps faded before allowing tears of rage to fall. 3 days. They were giving her 3 days to abandon Sabella and the cubs to whatever fate Devereaux had planned. The night was thick with stars when Larkin finally made her decision. She retrieved the tracking collar from her equipment locker, the one she'd give Rashid, and saving for an emergency. With trembling fingers, she activated the sophisticated GPS unit. "Hang on, girl," she whispered, thinking of Sabella. "I'm not leaving you out there alone." Before dawn, she slipped out into the bush. Using her intimate knowledge of Sabella's territory, she located the leopard's favorite morning hunting ground. The big cat appeared like a ghost in the pre-dawn light, pausing to drink at a small waterhole. Larkin's heart swelled at the sight of the 3 cubs tumbling after their adopted mother. They were growing fast, their golden coats beginning to darken with adolescence. Moving with the stealth learned from years in the field, she managed to get close enough to remotely attach the collar to Sabella's neck when the leopard bent to drink. The device was virtually invisible among Sabella's rosettes. No one would know the leopard was being tracked unless they knew exactly what to look for. Larkin allowed herself a small smile of triumph as she watched the unusual family disappear into the bush dot back at her station. She quickly encrypted the tracking data and sent a copy to Huck's secure server. If anything happened to her equipment, there would still be a record. She was technically disobeying direct orders, but watching that lion die had confirmed her worst fears. Someone was methodically eliminating threats to their control of the narrative. Her phone buzzed. Another warning message from Ridge Calloway. 70 hours remaining. But Larkin had made her choice. She would not abandon Sabella's family to whatever. Dark purpose was unfolding in the shadows of the reserve. Even if it meant risking everything she'd worked for, some things were worth fighting for. She heard Huck's familiar knock and quickly minimized the tracking program on her computer. Her friend entered carrying fresh coffee and a worried expression. "You, okay?" he asked, setting down the mugs. "I'm not leaving, Huck," she said firmly. "Not really. They can take my permits, but they can't take away what I know. Something terrible is happening here, and Sabella's family is at the center of it." Huck nodded slowly. "Then we'll figure it out together. But be careful, Lark. That poison lion was a message. Whoever's behind this isn't playing games. Larkin glanced at her computer, where a tiny dot showed Sabella's location. Neither am I, she whispered. Neither am I. Larkin's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard as she analyzed the data from Sabella's tracking collar. The small tent's interior felt stifling in the afternoon heat, but she barely noticed, completely absorbed in the patterns emerging on her screen. Her gray-green eyes narrowed as she overlaid the GPS coordinates with timestamps. This can't be. Right, she muttered, reaching for her worn field notebook. She'd been tracking Sabella's movements for 2 weeks now, and something wasn't adding up. Every single time the leopard and her adopted lion cubs approached any of the 3 main watering holes, tourist vehicles would appear at the nearby viewing. Blinds within 30 minutes. Huck Merriweather ducked into the tent, his medical kit slung over one shoulder and his camera gear over the other. Found something? Look at this. Larkin turned the laptop so he could see. These red dots show Sabella's locations. The blue markers are tourist convoy positions. Her finger traced a pattern across the screen. Every time they head for water, like clockwork, the trucks show up. It's not random viewing. They're tracking her deliberately. Huck set down his gear and leaned in closer. His normally cheerful face creased with concern. That's not standard tourist behavior. Those blinds are supposed to be randomly assigned. Exactly. Larkin pulled up another screen of data. And look at the timing. They're showing up before Sabella even reaches the water. Someone's monitoring. Her collar data in real time. The implications made her stomach churn. This wasn't about tourism at all. This was organized hunting, masked as legitimate game viewing. The pieces were falling into place. The poisoned lion, the pressure to leave, Ridge's evasive behavior. We need to confront Ridge, she said, closing her laptop. He can't deny this evidence. Huck ran a hand through his sun-bleached hair. Be careful, Larkin. If what we suspect is true, there's big money involved. These people won't take kindly to interference. She found Ridge Calloway at his usual afternoon post, monitoring the western sector from his Land Rover. The Ranger's weathered. Face showed resignation as she approached, as if he'd been expecting this conversation. I know what's happening, Larkin said without preamble, holding out her laptop. The convoy patterns match Sabella's movements perfectly. You're setting up high-dollar trophy hunts, aren't you? Using her collar data to track when she'd be vulnerable. Ridges. Fingers tightened on the steering wheel. It's not that simple. Then explain it to me, she demanded. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're using my research to help wealthy tourists hunt protected animals. These are illegal interventions, Ridge said, but his voice lacked conviction. Problem animals. Problem animals? Larkin's voice cracked with disbelief. Sabella and those cubs aren't problems. They're miracles. This is about money, plain and simple. Back in her tent that evening, Larkin and Huck spread out their evidence, collar data, convoy schedules, permit applications. A pattern emerged of wealthy visitors paying premium rates for special viewing opportunities that coincided with Sabella's movements. Look at these names, Huck said, pointing to a list. These aren't regular tourists. They're known trophy hunters, disguising their real intentions behind conservation permits. Larkin felt sick. They're using my research to set up kills. That's why they want me gone. I'm getting too close to the truth. She had 72 hours left before her permits expired. 72 hours to gather enough evidence to expose the whole operation. Her hands trembled as she organized her files, but her voice was steady when she spoke. I'm not leaving, Huck. Not until we prove what they're doing. These animals trust us. We can't abandon them now. Huck nodded, already reaching for his camera. Gear. Where do we start? We document everything. Every convoy movement. Every permit. every coincidental meeting at the watering holes. We build a case they can't ignore. They worked through the night, cross-referencing data and building their case. The evidence was damning. A sophisticated operation using scientific research as cover for illegal hunting. Larkin's determination grew with each connection they uncovered. They won't get away with this, she vowed, watching the sun rise over the savannah. Not while I can still fight. The African night wrapped around them like a velvet cloak as Larkin crouched behind a thorny acacia, her heart pounding against her ribs. She glanced at Huck, who gave her a reassuring nod from his position a few feet away. The beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness, sweeping across the marsh corridor where they'd tracked suspicious activity. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Ridge whispered from behind them, his tall frame tense with anxiety. "If we're caught out here, we don't have a choice," Larkin whispered back firmly. "The tracking data doesn't lie. Someone's been laying bait along these routes, right where Sabella takes the cubs to drink. Earlier that evening, she had practically dragged Ridge to her tent, spreading out maps and data logs that showed the disturbing pattern. Though initially resistant, even he couldn't deny the evidence. Someone was deliberately targeting the unusual family's known pathways. Huck adjusted his medical kit, always prepared for emergencies. "Movement. 2 o'clock, he murmured, gesturing toward a cluster of dried grass. They crept forward cautiously, using the scattered bushes as cover. The moon cast enough light to make out shapes, but not enough to feel secure. Ridge's experience as a ranger proved valuable as he guided them around potential hazards. "There," Larkin pointed, her voice barely audible. In the beam of their lights lay a partially concealed carcass, a young antelope that looked suspiciously placed. Ridge pulled on thick gloves and approached it carefully. "It's been tampered with," he confirmed grimly, examining the meat. "Poison. Probably strychnine. Same as what killed that male lion 2 weeks ago." Larkin felt sick to her stomach. "We need to remove it. All of it. And we need to check the entire corridor." For the next 2 hours, they methodically swept the area. The discovery was worse than they'd feared. 6 poison baits strategically placed along the marsh, each positioned where the Leopard family would likely find them dot as they worked to collect and properly dispose of the tainted meat. A sound froze them in place. The distinctive soft pad of large paws on dried grass, followed by smaller, playful steps. "Sabella," Larkin breathed, recognizing the leopard's movement pattern. "She's brought the cubs to drink." They quickly doused their lights, hearts racing. Through the darkness, they could make out Sabella's sleek form, her adopted cubs bouncing along behind her. The family was heading straight for where the last poisoned bait had been just minutes before. Larkin held her breath as Sabella paused, sniffing the air where they'd removed a tainted carcass. The cubs, growing bigger by the day, but still dependent on their adoptive mother, milled around her legs playfully. After what felt like an eternity, Sabella led her unusual family to the water's edge instead. They watched in silent relief as the group drank safely and moved on into the night. Once the Leopard family was well away, Huck let out a long breath. That was too close. "We did it," Larkin said quietly, still processing what they'd accomplished. She turned to Ridge, whose face showed a complex mix of emotions. "Thank you. We couldn't have done this without you." Ridge ran a hand over his weathered face. "This isn't just some accident or overzealous hunter," he said slowly. "This was professional. Organized. The placement, the timing." He looked at Larkin with new respect. "You were right to be suspicious." Huck began carefully packing the last of the contaminated meat into sealed containers. "So what now? This isn't over. They'll try again. Now we work together," Larkin said firmly, looking between her 2 allies. "We protect them, and we gather evidence." Someone wanted Sabella and those cubs dead enough to plan this carefully. We need to find out who and why. The night's success had forged something new between them, a shared purpose born of action rather than just words. As they made their way back through the darkness, their small alliance felt stronger, built on the foundation of saving innocent lives. Ridge cleared his throat. "I'll adjust my patrol routes," he offered. "Keep a closer eye on these corridors. And I'll set up some camera traps," Huck added. "Next time, we'll catch them in the act." Larkin felt a surge of hope as she listened to them plan. They'd prevented a tragedy tonight, but more importantly, they'd proven they could work together effectively. As they reached their vehicles, the distant sound of a leopard's call echoed across the savannah. Sabella, safe with her cubs, at least. For now, the adrenaline of the night's success hummed through their veins as they parted ways, each knowing that this was just the beginning. They had taken their first real stand together, and the bond forged in those tense hours would prove essential for the challenges ahead. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when Larkin heard the rumble of vehicles approaching her research station. Through her tense mesh window, she spotted 3 black SUVs kicking up dust as they rolled to a stop. Her stomach dropped as Barrett Devereux stepped out of the lead vehicle, his silver hair catching the early light. "Miss Keene," he called out, his voice carrying an artificial warmth that made her skin crawl. "I'm afraid we have some unpleasant business to discuss." Larkin emerged from her tent, chin held high despite her racing heart. 2 uniformed officers flanked Devereux, along with a man in a crisp suit clutching a leather briefcase. "By order of the Wildlife Conservation Board," the suited man announced, producing an official-looking document. "Your research permits have been suspended pending investigation into multiple violations of protocol." "What violations?" Larkin demanded, but Devereux merely smiled as his men began systematically confiscating her equipment. They took everything: her laptops, tracking devices, cameras, even her field notebooks. "Your unauthorized tracking of protected species, for one," Devereux replied smoothly. "Interference with natural wildlife behaviors. Breach of containment protocols." He checked items off on his fingers as if reading a shopping list. The list goes on. Larkin watched helplessly as years of research disappeared into black cases. "And bags. You can't do this." "My work is properly sanctioned." "Was sanctioned," Devereux corrected. "Until your recent obsession with that leopard began interfering with legitimate operations." A commotion from the access road drew their attention. Another vehicle approached, this one a police truck. Larkin's blood ran cold as she saw Huck. In the back, hands cuffed behind him. "What have you done?" she whispered. Mr. Merriweather was caught tampering with hunting blinds and interfering with authorized game management operations. Devereux explained, his satisfaction barely concealed. "Quite serious charges out here." Huck met her eyes as they drove past, his face tight with worry but determination still evident in his expression. He gave her a slight nod, a silent promise that he wouldn't break under pressure. "This won't stop me," Larkin said, turning back to Devereux. "You can take my equipment, but you can't hide what's happening here forever." Devereux stepped closer, dropping his diplomatic facade. "My dear, you don't seem to understand the situation. Your funding has been frozen. Your credentials are under review. Your closest ally is facing criminal charges." His voice lowered. "You are alone out here, Miss Keene, and this is my territory." As if to emphasize his point, the sound of motorcycles echoed across the savannah. In the distance, Larkin could see dust clouds rising as riders moved in formation through the brush. Her heart clenched as she realized their purpose. They were herding wildlife, directing movement towards specific locations. "You're forcing them into killing zones," she accused, fury rising in her throat. "We're managing problem animals using approved methods. Devereux replied coolly. Perhaps you should focus on your own problems rather than interfering with legitimate business operations. After they left, Larkin stood among the emptied ruins of her research station. Her satellite phone, tracking equipment, cameras, all gone. Even her vehicle had been impounded pending investigation. The isolation pressed in around her like a physical weight. But as she watched the dust trails of the night riders in the distance, something shifted in her understanding. The speed and efficiency of Devereux's response, the coordination between private security, police, and wildlife officials, this wasn't just about protecting hunting operations. The level of influence required to mobilize such forces so quickly suggested something far more extensive. She began walking, her mind racing. Devereux's empire wasn't built solely on luxury safaris and legal hunting permits. The speed with which he could freeze research funding, manipulate law enforcement, and coordinate multiple agencies hinted at a deeper network of corruption and control. In her tent that evening, working by battery-powered lantern, Larkin began mapping connections on the back of an old envelope, the only paper she had left. She traced lines between wildlife officials, local authorities, international hunting organizations, and export companies. At the center of it all sat Devereux, like a spider in an elaborate web. The sound of motorcycles continued into the night as the riders pressed their campaign to drive Sabella and her adopted cubs toward their chosen killing ground. Larkin felt the weight of her isolation, but her resolve hardened. Without equipment, without allies, she would have to find new ways to fight. And now she understood. This wasn't just about saving one unusual family of big cats. This was about exposing a system of corruption that reached far beyond the African bush. In the darkness, she allowed herself a grim smile. Devereux thought he had stripped her of everything that mattered, but he had actually given her something valuable. Clarity about the true scope of what she was fighting. And with that clarity came purpose, sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous. Midday heat bore down mercilessly as Larkin knelt in the dusty earth, her hands trembling as she examined the rusted leg-hold trap. She had found it half buried near the coordinates where Sabella frequently visited with the cubs. The trap's cruel metal teeth still held traces of fur and dried blood. This isn't just any trap, she muttered to herself, pulling out her phone to document the evidence. The manufacturer's mark caught her eye, a small stamp that matched invoices she'd seen in Devereux's supply records. Her throat tightened as the pieces started falling into place. Back in her makeshift workspace, Larkin spread out her findings. Satellite tracking data showed the lioness's last known locations, overlapped perfectly with areas where Devereux's hunting parties had operated. DNA analysis from blood samples on the trap confirmed what she had dreaded. It was from the cubs. "Mother, the cubs weren't abandoned," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Their mother was killed, and not by accident." As she dug deeper into historical records, another shocking revelation emerged. 3 years ago, she had rehabilitated a young female leopard with a distinctive scar along her flank, the very same marking she now saw on Sabella in her drone footage. The realization hit her like a physical blow. "It's you," Larkin breathed, staring at the footage playing on her laptop. "All this time, it was you." Memories flooded back of the weeks spent nursing that injured Leopard back to health, of the unique bond they had formed. She remembered the leopard's intelligent eyes, the way she had trusted Larkin despite her injuries. Now, that same leopard was raising 3 orphan cubs, created by the very system that had once nearly killed her. Larkin's hands clenched into fists as she thought of Devereux's smug face, his carefully crafted image as a conservation champion. The truth was far darker. His luxury safari empire was built on blood money, on the deliberate destruction of the very wildlife he claimed to protect. She pulled up more files, cross-referencing dates and locations. The pattern was undeniable. Devereaux's suppliers had systematically set traps throughout the territory, targeting predators under the guise of problem animal control. The lioness had simply been their latest victim. "This changes everything," Larkin said aloud, her voice steady despite her racing heart. This wasn't just about protecting an unprecedented scientific phenomenon anymore. This was about justice. Justice for the murdered lioness, for Sabella's past trauma, for every animal that had suffered at Devereaux's hands. She began methodically documenting everything, creating multiple backups of her evidence. The trap, the DNA results, the supply chain records, Sabella's medical history from years ago. It all painted a damning picture of systematic cruelty masked by wealth and influence. As the sun began to set, Larkin stood at her tense entrance, watching the golden light fade from the savannah. Somewhere out there, Sabella was protecting those cubs, turning tragedy into something miraculous. The leopard's resilience, her capacity to nurture despite her own past trauma, struck Larkin as profound. "I won't let him win," she promised the gathering darkness. Not this time. The weight of her discovery settled over her like a mantle. She understood now that she wasn't just fighting to protect a unique scientific case. She was fighting to break a cycle of corruption and cruelty that had gone unchallenged for too long. And her connection to Sabella, forged years ago in that rehabilitation center, made it deeply personal. The evidence was clear. Devereaux's empire of luxury safaris was built on a foundation of deliberate wildlife destruction. The leg-hold traps, the strategic placement of hunting parties, the careful cover-ups, it was all designed to create artificial scarcity, driving up prices for his exclusive hunting experiences while maintaining a public image of conservation. Larkin carefully packed away her findings, knowing that every piece of evidence would be crucial in the fight ahead. The trap that had killed the cub's mother wasn't just a tragic accident. It was a smoking gun, linking Devereaux directly to the systematic destruction of wildlife he claimed to protect. As night fell completely, Larkin checked the latest GPS coordinates from Sabella's collar. The leopard and her adopted cubs were safe for now, hidden in one of their regular shelters. But Larkin knew that safety was precarious as long as Devereaux remained in power. The truth she had uncovered wasn't just about one dead lioness or one rehabilitated leopard. It was about an entire system of corruption that threatened everything she had dedicated her life to protecting. And now, with Sabella's past connection adding personal weight to her mission, Larkin felt more determined than ever to see justice done. She spent the night organizing her evidence, preparing for the battle ahead. The revelation of Devereaux's role in the lioness's death, combined with the discovery of Sabella's identity, had transformed her scientific mission into something far more profound, a fight for justice that encompassed both personal and professional stakes. The African sun blazed overhead as Larkin hunched over her laptop in the small research outpost. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, compiling the damning evidence she'd gathered against Devereaux. The collar data, photos of illegal traps, and documentation of suspicious tourist movements all painted a clear picture of corruption. "Time to show the world what you really are," she whispered, pressing send on emails to major wildlife conservation organizations and international news outlets. The evidence package included GPS coordinates, timestamp photos, and detailed analysis of hunting patterns that coincided with Devereaux's exclusive safari experiences. Her phone buzzed, a message from a contact at the local police station where Huck was being held. The fabricated charges wouldn't hold up against international scrutiny. Within hours of her data leak, pressure mounted from wildlife protection, agencies, and diplomatic channels. By sunset, Huck walked free, his face showing the strain of 3 days in detention. "You didn't have to risk everything," he said, joining her at the outpost. Yes, I did, Larkin replied firmly. We all did. Look at this. She showed him her laptop screen, where emails of support were pouring in from conservation groups worldwide. We're not alone anymore. Ridge arrived as darkness fell, his uniform dusty from a long day in the field. His usually stoic face showed signs of internal struggle. The evidence you sent out, those trap suppliers, I recognize some of the names. They've been working with Devereux for years. And now everyone knows it, Larkin said. But we're not done yet. I have a plan to catch him red-handed. She pulled up Sabella's caller data and began making adjustments. We're going to give Devereux exactly what he wants. A perfect hunting opportunity. Except this time, we'll be ready. Huck leaned in, studying the fabricated movement patterns she was creating. You're making it look like Sabella and the Cubs are establishing a new territory? Near the North Waterhole, Larkin confirmed. It's isolated, away from regular tourist routes. Exactly the kind of place Devereux would choose for his illegal hunts. Ridge shifted uncomfortably. He's desperate now. The international attention, the evidence coming out, he'll want to eliminate. The problem, quickly. That's what we're counting on, Larkin said. His greed and panic will make him sloppy. I've already contacted trusted journalists and wildlife officers. They'll be in position when he makes his move. They spent hours refining the plan. Huck would set up hidden cameras around the waterhole. Ridge would ensure his patrol routes left the area conveniently unmonitored at specific times. Larkin would continue feeding false collar data suggesting predictable movements, a perfect setup for a hunting party. What about Sabella and the Cubs? Huck asked. They need to be far away when this goes down. Larkin nodded. I've been tracking their real movements. They're safely on the other side of the reserve. The only ones walking into a trap will be Devereux and his hunters. As midnight approached, Ridge stood to leave, his decision made. I'll do my part. But Larkin, be careful. Devereux has friends in high places. They won't go down without a fight. That's why we need solid evidence, she replied. No one can argue with video footage of illegal hunting in action. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Huck carefully positioned cameras with clear views of the waterhole and likely approach routes. Larkin continued updating the false collar data, making the pattern more and more tempting. Ridge provided crucial information about security patrol, schedules and the locations of Devereux's most trusted guides. The trap was set. Now they waited for Devereux's greed to bring him right where they wanted him. The international spotlight was already making him desperate. His luxury safari bookings were dropping as news of the investigation spread. The pressure would push him to act quickly, to eliminate the source of his troubles before his empire crumbled. Larkin worked through the night, coordinating with their growing network of allies. Wildlife protection agencies stood ready to act. Journalists prepared to document everything. Even local authorities, faced with international scrutiny, could no longer ignore the mounting evidence. We've got movement, Huck reported early the next morning. Devereux's personal vehicles are being prepped. His favorite hunting guide arrived an hour ago. Larkin checked the collar data one last time. The false signals showed Sabella and the Cubs settling into a routine around the waterhole. A perfect target. He's taking the bait. Everyone ready? Ridge's voice crackled over the radio. Ready. My patrol route is clear. Whatever happens in the next 24 hours, I won't be anywhere near the North Waterhole. The pieces were in place. Larkin, Huck, and Ridge had transformed from desperate defenders into strategic hunters themselves, but their prey was the true predator who had terrorized the reserve for too long. The trap was set, baited with Devereux's own greed and arrogance. Now they just had to spring it at the perfect moment. Through the eerie green glow of night vision goggles, Larkin watched Devereux's convoy snake through the darkened savannah. 3 Land Rovers moved in formation, their headlights off to avoid detection. Her heart pounded as she tracked their movement through her scope. "They're taking the bait," Huck whispered beside her, adjusting his camera to capture the evidence. The infrared footage showed the vehicles following the exact path where they'd planted the false collar data. Larkin allowed herself a small smile. After weeks of careful planning, they had Devereaux exactly where they wanted him. The convoy was heading straight for the Box Canyon, where authorities waited to intercept them. "I count 6 men in the lead vehicle," Huck reported, zooming in. "Devereaux is in the middle one, of course. Wouldn't want to get his hands dirty up." Front, a crackle came through their radio headsets. "Target is approaching Checkpoint Alpha," came the voice of one of the wildlife officers positioned ahead. "Stand by for intercept." But something wasn't right. The convoy suddenly slowed, then stopped completely. Through her goggles, Larkin saw the lead vehicle make a sharp turn east, away from their planned intercept point. No, she muttered. "They're changing course. How did they know?" The answer hit her like a physical blow as Ridge's voice came through the radio. "Mr. Devereaux, be advised. They've set up an ambush in the canyon. Take the eastern access road to Site B. Ridge, you traitor." Larkin hissed, though he couldn't hear her. The Ranger had been playing both sides all along, feeding their plans back to Devereaux while pretending to help them. "We have to move now," Huck said urgently. "If they reach Site B, they'll have a clear shot at the waterhole where Sabella takes the cubs at night. They scrambled down from their observation point, racing through the bush toward their waiting vehicle. Larkin's mind raced faster than her feet. Site B was an isolated spot perfect for an ambush, but of Sabella, not Devereaux. They had to get there first. The Land Cruiser's engine roared to life as Huck threw it into gear. They bounced roughly over the uneven terrain, taking a desperate shortcut through the scrubland. Branches whipped against the windshield as they crashed through the undergrowth. Suddenly, muzzle flashes lit up the night ahead of them. The sharp crack of gunfire split the air. Bullets pinged off their vehicle's frame as Huck swerved hard, throwing them behind an outcropping of rocks. "Out! Get out!" he shouted, already diving from the driver's seat. Larkin scrambled after him just as more shots sparked off the rocks around them. The acrid smell of cordite filled her nostrils orange. Flames began to leap up from the dry brush where tracer rounds had ignited the vegetation. The fire spread quickly, turning the night lurid with flickering shadows. Smoke began to curl through the air, stinging Larkin's eyes. "We're pinned down," Huck said grimly, checking his phone. "No signal to call for backup." Larkin peered around the edge of their cover, trying to spot their attackers through the growing flames. A bullet struck inches from her head, sending stone chips flying. She jerked back with a gasp. "We have to get to higher ground," she said, gesturing to a rocky slope behind them. "We're sitting ducks here." They began to work their way up the incline, staying low and using the smoke for cover. The rocks were loose and treacherous under their feet. Larkin's boots scrabbled for purchase on the crumbling surface. Halfway up, her foot slipped on loose scree. With a cry of alarm, she felt herself sliding toward the edge of a sharp drop-off. Her fingers clawed desperately at the rocks as she went over, somehow catching a jutting root at the last second. "Huck!" she screamed, dangling precariously above a 30-foot fall. Bullets continued to crack overhead, sending sparks showering down around her. The root began to pull loose from the soil. "Hold on." Huck army crawled to the edge, reaching down toward her. "Give me your other hand." Larkin stretched upward, straining to grasp his extended hand. The distance seemed impossible. The root shifted again, dirt cascading down as it pulled further from the ground. Below her feet was nothing but empty air and jagged rocks stopped more gunfire. Raked their position. Huck flinched but held his ground, still reaching for her. "Come on, Larkin. You can do this." The flames were spreading up the slope now, turning the night into a hellish inferno. Smoke burned Larkin's lungs as she made one final desperate attempt to reach Huck's hand. Their fingers brushed, barely touching. The root gave way with a sharp crack. Larkin felt herself starting to fall, time seeming to slow as reality hit her. Their careful plan had completely unraveled. Ridge's betrayal had turned their moment of triumph into a deadly trap. Now, suspended between sky and earth, she faced the terrifying consequence of their failure. Through the chaos of fire, gunshots, and her own pounding heartbeat, one thought burned in her mind. She couldn't fail now. Sabella and the cubs were counting on her. Somewhere in the darkness, Devereux was closing in on them. If she fell here, there would be no one left to stand between him and his prey. Larkin's arms trembled as she pressed herself against the rough bark of an ancient baobab tree. Bullets whizzed past, sending splinters flying. The acrid smell of gun smoke mixed with the earthy African night air. Beside her, Huck's breathing came in ragged gasps. "We can't stay here much longer," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "They're going to flank us any minute." Larkin knew he was right. Her muscles screamed from exhaustion, and the weight of their failure pressed down on her like a physical thing. Ridge's betrayal had led them straight into Devereux's trap, and now they were pinned down with nowhere to run. But Huck wasn't done yet. She watched as he reached into his battered pack with steady hands, pulling out their last hope, a small drone equipped with an emergency beacon. "If we can get their attention split even for a moment," he said, his eyes meeting hers with determined focus. Larkin nodded, understanding the plan without words. Years of friendship had given them that kind of shorthand. "Do it." Huck's hands were remarkably steady as he prepped the drone, despite the chaos around them. Another burst of gunfire peppered their position, and Larkin instinctively ducked lower. "Ready?" he asked, positioning the controller. "Wait for my signal," Larkin whispered, watching the pattern of muzzle flashes through the darkness. She counted the seconds between bursts, timing it just right. Now, the small drone shot upward with a high-pitched whine, its emergency lights blazing to life like a miniature sun. The sudden brightness drew immediate attention, exactly as they'd hoped. Gunfire shifted upward, tracking the moving target instead of their position. But what happened next made Larkin's breath catch in her throat. A shadow moved through the darkness, fluid, silent, and deadly familiar. Sabella, the leopard's muscles, rippled as she glided through the tall grass, barely disturbing a blade. Behind her, 3 nearly full-grown lions followed with the same uncanny stealth she'd taught them, moving nothing like typical lions would. They'd learned their adoptive mother's ways well. My God, Huck breathed, his camera up and recording. Look at them move. The family of impossible predators split apart with tactical precision. Sabella took the lead, while her cubs circled wide through the darkness. They were using the exact hunting formation Larkin had observed them practicing months ago, but now it wasn't for taking down prey. They were outflanking armed men. The first sign that something was wrong came from one of Devereux's hired guns. A startled shout cut short as a massive lion landed on their vehicle from a low-hanging acacia branch. The others had no time to react before 2 more attacks came from different directions. The night exploded into chaos. Vehicles swerved wildly as drivers tried to escape the ambush. Men fired blindly into the darkness at Sabella and her cubs. Were already gone, only to appear again from another direction. They weren't attacking to kill. They were creating confusion and terror with surgical precision. Through her night vision goggles, Larkin watched Ridge standing near Devereux's vehicle. In the green-tinted view, she saw the moment something in him finally broke. His shoulders straightened, and in one fluid motion, he turned and grabbed Devereux's rifle. "Enough!" Ridge's voice carried across the clearing. "This ends now." Devereaux's face contorted with rage. "What do you think you're doing?" "What I should have done weeks ago," Ridge replied, his voice steady as he kept the rifle trained on his former boss. "Larkin, get out here and bring that camera." Larkin and Huck emerged from their hiding spot, Huck's camera recording everything. Around them, the night had gone suddenly still. Sabella and her cubs had melted back into the darkness. Their work done, but their presence still felt like electricity in the air. "You're finished, Devereaux," Larkin said, her voice stronger than she felt. "We have everything. The poaching, the illegal hunts, the poison baits, all of it." Devereaux's usual polished demeanor had cracked completely. "You have no idea what you're doing," he snarled. "The people I work with will want nothing to do with you once this goes public." Larkin cut him off. "It's over." As if to punctuate her words, a low growl rumbled from the darkness. Sabella emerged briefly into the moonlight, her cubs flanking her like shadows. Their message was clear. Any further resistance would be met with force. Through Huck's camera lens, the truth was finally being captured, not just of Devereaux's crimes, but of something even more extraordinary. A family that defied nature's rules, working together to protect those who had protected them. The leopard who had adopted lion cubs had now taught them to be more than just lions. They were a new kind of predator, combining the strength of their birth species with the cunning and stealth of their adoptive mother. Ridge kept his rifle trained on Devereaux as Larkin used his own satellite phone to call in the authorities. The night was still young, and there would be hours of explanations ahead. But for now, the immediate danger had passed. Justice was finally catching up to Barrett Devereaux, brought down by the very creatures he had tried to destroy. The morning sun painted the Botswanan savannah in shades of gold as a convoy of government vehicles kicked up dust clouds along the dirt road. Larkin stood with Huck at her side, watching the officials approach. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment everything would change. 3 black SUVs came to a stop, and uniformed wildlife authorities stepped out, followed by representatives from the International Conservation Committee. Larkin's data drops and footage had reached exactly the right people. "Ms. Keene," the lead officer called out, his voice carrying authority. "We received your evidence package. Every bit of it checks out." Behind them, more vehicles approached, these carrying local police. Larkin watched as they pulled up to Devereaux's lodge. The sight of Barrett Devereaux being led out in handcuffs made her breath catch. The usually impeccable safari baron looked disheveled, his silver hair unkempt, his expensive clothing wrinkled. "You can't do this," Devereaux shouted, struggling against the restraints. "Do you know who I am? I built this place." Ridge Calloway stepped forward, his ranger's uniform neat. Despite the early hour, the fatigue that had weighed on him for so long seemed lighter now. "And I'll tell them exactly how you built it," he said firmly. "Every illegal hunt, every trapped animal, every bribe." Devereaux's face twisted with rage. "You treacherous, save it for court." The police officer cut him off, guiding him into the vehicle. Huck touched his bandaged arm gingerly, a reminder of their close call during the confrontation. "Never thought I'd see the day," he said with a tired smile. "Worth every scrape and bullet graze." Over the next several hours, Larkin watched as authorities combed through Devereaux's records. They uncovered more than even she had suspected. Decades of illegal trophy hunting, endangered animal trafficking, falsified permits. His entire empire had been built on corruption and death. Ridge's testimony proved crucial. He provided dates, locations, names, everything the authorities needed to dismantle Devereaux's network. When he finished giving his statement, he found Larkin waiting. "I know it doesn't make up for everything," he said quietly, "but I hope it's a start." Larkin nodded. "It is." Thank you. The news spread quickly through the conservation community. By afternoon, Larkin's phone was buzzing constantly, with messages of support and congratulations. Her grant had not only been reinstated but expanded, with international organizations clamoring to fund her research. But as she stood on her favorite observation point that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Larkin knew her real victory had nothing to do with acclaim or funding. In the distance, movement caught her eye. 3 young male lions emerged from the brush, their muscles rippling beneath golden coats. They moved with an unusual grace, part lions, power, part leopard stealth. Behind them came Sibella, her spotted coat glowing in the dying light. The family paused at the water's edge. The lions, now fully grown, positioned themselves protectively around their leopard mother as she drank. Love had created this impossible. Family and love had protected them against all odds. Larkin felt tears prick her eyes as she watched them. Her decision to stay in Botswana wasn't really a decision at all. It was simply acknowledging what she'd known all along. This was where she belonged. It needs a name, Huck said softly, coming to stand beside her. His arm was healing well, and his camera was already back in action, capturing the remarkable scene before them. Larkin smiled, watching as Sibella led her adopted sons along the safe corridor they'd fought so hard to protect. Sibella's path, she said with quiet certainty, because it shows us that love doesn't care about boundaries or rules. It just finds a way. The family moved together through the gathering dusk, their shapes merging with the shadows. But Larkin knew they were safe now, protected by new laws, watched over by people who understood their value. And she would be there, documenting their story, preserving the miracle that had brought them together. The African night settled around them, stars appearing one by one in the vast sky. Somewhere in the distance, a lion roared, one of Sibella's sons, his voice carrying both strength and joy. His leopard mother's answering call echoed across the savannah, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful bonds are the ones that break all the rules. As darkness fell completely, Larkin remained at her post, her heart full. Justice had been served, corruption exposed, and the future secured. But her greatest reward was simply this: watching a family born of impossible love make their way home across the African plain, knowing they were finally, truly safe. Thank you for watching. If even one moment stayed with you, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow with another story that speaks to the heart.